core modeling, okay? So this is where we spend most of our time. In Creo 7, there was a bit of an update to the dashboards and the skinning of those. Sort of a bit of a reconfiguration of how they look and feel. A bit more text to help new users understand what that is, rather than just icons. So that's also been tweaked a bit more in Creo 8. Okay, so some options to open up the important panels, to detach panels, to really build a dashboard layout that you like and works for you. So we'll show this in the demonstration soon. Yeah. In terms of other things around displaying of information on the screen, particularly datum information. So again, some changes here. A new option for having a transparent fill on your datum planes. You can tweak that if you want. You can, certain areas it's turned off, such things like if you go into Sketcher and the like. There's some new options for how datum points and coordinate systems get displayed. Again, all of this stuff can be controlled like you always could through your file options. Okay, and if you do want to work in the old way of datum planes, you can still do that as well. Visibility control. So visibility control was introduced in Creo 7. For those of you who might have seen it, it was buried away inside the tools menu, or sorry, the view menu. So that's been now moved into the graphics toolbar, and also has the option added in there now for helping control quilts. So the idea of this is it allows you the ability to basically control the transparency for bodies, quilts, or tessellated geometry. Very useful if you're working with some of the reverse engineering tools, scan data, or some of the geometry building through the generative topology tools. So we can basically take bodies or geometry or surfaces, make them transparent, independent of the colors, and then we can go and quickly and easily toggle the amount of transparency through the sliders. So those of you who do a lot of surface modeling of your parts, there's a lot of nice things. This is one of them. Easily, sort of turn off all your solids so you can see quilts without having to use layers. And there's some other options as well, which we'll see a bit later on, that are great for those of you doing a lot of surface modeling. Okay, on the selection side of things, a few new options there around defaulting selecting quilts as well, so making them easy to grab. You can still use your query select like you've always been able to do, but there's some other options in there as well with your select from parents. Creating datums. So some options, new options for helping control the datum plane size. So the default is to automatically fit around the model outline like it's always been, but there are some new options there for controlling sizes as well as you're building these new options. Okay, so you can set default heights and widths and how they display in your config options. New update to the replace references. Okay, so if you're working with changing those references around, there's a new option there to recursively handle all of the references if you're doing things like quilt replacement and the like when you're dealing with these sorts of complex shapes. When we get into Sketcher, so I've extended out some of the stuff that came in 7, now in 8 in some of the in Sketcher as well. So some more controls there over the dimension background appearance of Sketcher. So where you have that sort of, in Creo, earlier versions of Creo, it might have been a bit hard to see depending on your color scheme you're running with, as shown here in the screenshot. Now we've got this sort of transparent box around that. You can control that through your options and settings where you see that. Maybe you only want to see it in Sketch, maybe you want to see it everywhere. A few more options around, when you move your cursor over, how they highlight, updating the dimension dragger to make that easy to see. Okay, and also a new option for whether you should see weak dimensions or not by default. On the whole feature, a whole bunch of stuff in there, pun intended. So again, I'll say this a lot, the dashboard has been redone to update that to basically keep more consistent with the new theme that's in there now. And sort of basically simplifying that workflow, make it easier to see what you've got to work with. And then a bunch of new options for your holes. Okay, so if you're using standard holes, how that works with all of the callouts that are there, some of the fit options as well. There's a new multi-hole feature option. Now, I know a lot of you, we tell you in the training you should create hole features because rather than an extruded sketch, and you still go in and create a sketch with a whole bunch of circles in it. So now we can actually create a hole feature with all of the advantages of holes, the ability to change the sizing and switch it to a standard hole and tapping and all your other options, but a new multi-hole feature based off a sketch. So I'll have a look at that in the demo. Also, lightweight representation support. So that's been around for a long time. I think since the wildfire days, from memory. So the ability to display a hole as a lightweight, essentially like a curve that represents where that hole is. So if you're working with models with hundreds or thousands of holes inside, and you don't want your model to get really slow, you can set them to lightweight. So now that option is there for any type of hole that you might create. Okay. Working with, again, back to our standard holes, okay, so there's some more support for tapped and tapered holes now. So some new options for your MPT, MPTF, and ISO 7 standard holes. Okay, so some more options around how you handle threads as well with those holes in terms of the depth options for them and how they how the thread surface generation should be handled when you've got intersections and things like that as well. Some other modeling stuff. So there's a new geodesic curve between 2 points. So this is actually, I guess, something that's come from the creepage and clearance module that's available inside Creo. Has been around since about Creo 3 days, I think it was first introduced, to help you with sort of spark checking air gaps and things like that. So we've now got the ability to create a curve through points that runs along a surface. Okay, so either point to point along the surface, like you can see here, so just in a straight line, but running across the surface. Or if we make it a geodesic curve, basically the shortest distance between those 2 points as it works that out. Okay, so it could be very handy in certain cases where you're trying to run things through, work out clearances and the like. Okay, so this one is for I think particularly for people who do surface modeling, but still handy with solids as well. So a whole bunch of new options around how you work with quilts. Okay, so there's this new option. Again, I'll get into this in the demonstration to really show how it works around showing snapshots. Okay, so it's really the ability to see what did this quilt look like back at the point when I built it before I started consuming it as I started to do all of my merge and intersects and everything else. So it's a great way to go back and see how something was built without having to roll back through the model tree or use layers or anything like that as well to see it. Okay, so I can quickly and easily see what the surface looked like at a point in time, and then at that point in time, I can actually create a copy of that snapshot to then build a new surface that I might want to use for some other actions as well. Okay, sort of related to that is also the new design tree. So the design tree is a tool to essentially help you organize and manage your document design intent. Okay, so basically you've got your design items now that appear in the model tree up the top. So in Creo 7, we just saw bodies appearing there. Now this design items actually includes bodies, any quilts if you're working with them, annotations and material definitions. Okay, so we can start to put them inside that. But what we can also start to do then is actually create our own custom groups inside that design items. So what that lets you do is basically sort of group together in your own way any particular items that are related to a particular design part of your model. Okay, so that can be bodies, quilts, uh, you know, tolerances, whatever it might be, or annotations, I should say. So to build these custom groups up, and it's completely independent of the order in the model tree, completely independent of what type of feature it is. So it lets you really sort of put things together without having to create groups in your model tree. I know a lot of you do that and rename them, which is good practice, but this is giving you a little bit more flexibility in terms of arranging and studying and tracking how this thing was built. We'll look at this in the demo to see how that works. So with that design tree, we've now got the option, since it's been introduced, we've also got the option to now basically put that side by side with the model tree. Okay, so as I said, it's a different way of grouping things together. So rather than having one or the other, we can actually show both of them together. And then we've got, sort of auto location across selections. So if I select something on the screen, it'll highlight in both of those trees so I can understand where things are at and how they're related to each other. Okay, so the design tree is new. As it says, there's a couple of limitations. It's not available in assembly mode. At the moment, it's in part mode only. And in certain part areas, it'll disappear, things like flexible modeling where it's not really relevant or useful. Still on the surfacing side of things primarily. A lot of the editing tools, so they were all in earlier versions of Creo, they were object action, right? So things like merging, offsetting, thicken, solidify, those sorts of tools. You had to pick the quilts or the surface geometry first before those tools were to become available and highlighted in the ribbon. So now that they also work off action object. So they'll be available right from the start. I can start that tool and then I'll be asked to pick the references for them. So you can basically work both ways with those. Okay. So there's a new option here for managing UI customizations. Okay. So if you're an administrator and you want to roll out particular customization settings, there's some tools there for exporting them out. There's options if you want to reset things back. So all of this stuff is still stored in the .ui file like it's been since the introduction of Creo, but there's a new tool there to help you manage and work with those.